How can you artfully document and process the experiences of your life without keeping a traditional scrapbook or sharing it on social media? Big life changes make great topics for a single subject visual journal because you can keep it all private and you don't have to show it to anyone unless you want to. And you also don't have to worry about having any type of special art technique to do it. Today, I'll give you a tour of the visual journal I kept when I went to business school, created out of an altered book. Hi, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Lisa Sonora, and this channel is all about using your creativity for your personal and spiritual growth to support your healing and well being. Visual journaling is a really satisfying medium for making art because it's private, like a written journal. So there's no pressure to show it, share it, or even worry about it being artistic.
The visual journal I kept during business school is not done in a blank sketchbook, but rather inside of an existing book. So you can see here the author's name, the original title, The Working Girl in a Man's World, and I collaged and glued things in over the pages. This journal now is over 20 years old and it's gotten quite a workout. I need to do some repair here, but anyway, I wanted to show it to you. I'm not going to show you every page, but I'll flip through and explain certain things as I go. One thing I do a lot is photograph pages of different visual journals. So here you can see this image here is actually a photo of another visual journal. And this whole piece is from when I actually applied to business school. So I created my application as a standalone visual journal. And this is a page from that on the left. And I illustrated my application with images from my visual journal. So I was asking, what does an MBA have to do with being a poet and an artist? Good question, because I didn't know if they would accept me. I was inspired to go to business school, not a traditional business school, but one that focused on social justice and environmental economics. So our focus was the triple bottom line with people, planet, before profit. Here you can see the contents of the original book, and again, a page that I glued in from that application with a picture of another of my visual journals. This is kind of my About Me page that I glued in here. I wanted to include the process of what it was like to even apply to go to business school because it was just such a big change in my life, a big new focus for the next few years. So I really wanted to document that for myself. And so I included it in this visual journal that I started once I knew I got accepted. There are some childhood photos in here. I don't have a lot of photos from my childhood, but the theme of nature and kind of my true purpose, if you will, my higher purpose of being an artist for social change, I guess you could put it that way, was with me all along throughout my whole life. So that's why I included a lot of different childhood photos. These are notes I took on a visit to meet the CEO of Cliff Bar. So while we were in this program, we got to meet with all sorts of thought leaders doing environmentally and socially just businesses. Nature, as I mentioned, is a big theme for this visual journal, well, and my life. It was actually spending a lot of time in the wilderness that inspired me to go to this business school program, this green MBA, because I wanted to be aware of the environmental and social impacts of business. I really wanted to start my own business, and that was really important to me. I was asking this question, how can marketing be used for good? How can advertising be used for good instead of to push products and services on us that are really destructive or detrimental to the environment and people, us people on the planet? This was the card that I picked up at the Green Festival. I think it was the second annual or maybe the first annual Green Festival, and the Green MBA was advertising there. Here's the back of the card. So I love cutting windows and doors into my visual journals. This is a window, and I glued the card in between these pages. A poem that I really love by William Stafford. Again, another childhood photo. There I am feeding a fawn. I want the experience of the butterfly. This page I read to you in another video. I'll link it at the end of this one, Why Keep a Visual Journal, and I explain more about that. My experiences living in Alaska. These are things I transcribed. One of my favorite artists he goes by the name of Hundertwasser. It means 100 waters, and he changed his name a lot, but he was a painter and kind of turned green architect. Anyway, if you have a chance to check out his work, really inspiring. He had this kind of manifesto on living in nature and how we can be. This is a photocopy of a visual journal page from a different visual journal that I put in here. Oh, this is some of Hundertwasser's work here. Among trees, you are home. That says it all for me in so many ways. It's going to take a miracle learning finance, accounting, and economics. I have this Krispy Kreme ad in here. I love the word asset. It's so funny, but at the time I was going to business school, I had this experience of driving back and forth, and it seemed like everywhere I went, whether it was a grocery store or a gas station, there were these Krispy Kreme kiosks or stands or places you could always buy Krispy Kreme donuts, and I thought that was very bizarre. Like, let's keep everyone sugared and eating a lot of fat, so maybe they won't ask any questions. I do lots of collage, lots of abstract work in my visual journals, so if you look at these pages, they're not going to mean anything to you. They mean a lot to me. This was my green design firm. A visit to Guatemala that I took at this time. I wanted to go see organic coffee production for myself, so I went to the farm where they grow the coffee beans and process the coffee beans. Boy, appreciate every drop of coffee. It is really back-breaking hard labor to grow coffee and process it. And really the profits go to the coffee sellers, not the people making it so much. So I wanted to see that for myself. I feel so much gratitude for farmers. This photo I've used in some artwork. Someone took a picture of me in my little tree house in the woods where I was going to business school. It literally was a tree house in the woods where I lived, and it was wonderful. But there I was with my very messy, this is typical of me, my messy desk, my cup of coffee, working in a different visual journal, or maybe this one, actually. Yeah, I know what picture that was. Anyway, my friend took this picture of me, and I think it's a really good idea to photograph yourself doing your artwork, working in your journals, your sketchbooks. Have someone take your picture or take a selfie, because that's one of the also very few photos I have of myself during that time, and it's not lost in the digital graveyard somewhere. I don't even think I have those photos from 20 years ago, so actually printing them out and putting them in your visual journal is really helpful so that you actually have them. So here you can see the background of the original book that I altered, and I loved this phrase, or this chapter, How to Beat a Man. It's kind of funny. Anyway, and there's Georgia O'Keeffe, and then here's a quote from a design magazine that I cut out. Having the visual journal shows me my thought process at the time, my creative process. It happens in this very abstract way inside the visual journal. This is one of the very first examples of green advertising. I was always collecting those at the time. Late 90s, early 2000s. I think it's a Ford ad. Yeah, Ford Motor Company. I just thought it was beautiful how they did it in this collage way, and they're talking about what they're doing ecologically. I studied that a lot and paid a lot of attention to that. The company I started and why I went to business school in the first place is I wanted to form my own social justice, environmentally conscious, green advertising and marketing agency. So that's what I did my business plan on, and I actually started my business while I was still in school. Here are notes from presentations, pitches we had to give all the time, and then our teachers had our students critique us, so here's some of the notes. These were the woods right outside my treehouse where I lived. I'm literally a tree hugger, if you haven't guessed that by now. I have this quote by Thru here. I don't know if you can see it, but he said, "It is vain to dream of wildness distant from ourselves. There is none such." So I think the wilderness is us, or we're in it, we are it, we're part of it. It's not something out there. We impact it. Asking potent questions. I used these as visual journal prompts and written journal prompts. I should mention too, I keep a lot of other separate journals, written journals, all different types of visual journals. So I'm compiling a playlist of those. I've always been a writer as well as a visual artist, and you can see here this example of combining writing and visual art together in visual journals. I've always done it. I've tried hard to separate them, and then I just go back to this medium. I guess I finally figured out over decades that it's my medium. I think of it like a visual memoir, a genre that doesn't exist, but I've been thinking about my work as a type of visual memoir for the last 10 years or 15 years or so. But this page is a manuscript from a writing course I took. So I included a piece of that manuscript, gluing it into the altered book and then coloring over it. All of the leaves you're seeing here also, They were collected at Emily Dickinson's house in Massachusetts. It's a place you can go visit. Poets, poetry writers, people who were connected with nature, whether they're visual artists, writers. There's just different artists who I've resonated with throughout my life. And if possible, I try to make a pilgrimage to where they live and where they worked. If their studio or home is open to the public, I will plan a whole trip just for that. And when I was on her property, it was fall, and I was actually studying with my writing mentor, Pat Schneider. I went to a couple of advanced trainings and retreats at her studio in Amherst. It's also where Emily Dickinson lives, so it was really wonderful to be able to go on that trip with my teacher. And what really stood out to me were all the trees on the property. And since it was fall and there were all these leaves on the ground, I just collected a pile of leaves and I started gluing them into my visual journals from that time. And the application I submitted for business school had leaves from Emily Dickinson's home on every page as well. And I think I said something in the application like, I don't know why I put these leaves in here, but I was really compelled to do it, and that's part of my creative process. One of my teachers and things he said, his evaluations of me. There's me as a kiddo playing the organ. My undergraduate degree's in music therapy, and I majored in jazz piano. And this page starts out, I really wanted to be a famous jazz singer, but it didn't work out that way. Chicago, where I lived and grew up. This has been quite a bit of a tour. I hope this gives you some ideas for how you can keep a visual journal in an altered book.
If you want to see more of my visual journals, I will link a playlist in the description box below, along with resources in case you want to take a visual journaling workshop with me. If you are enjoying this content, I think you'd really like my classes. Thanks so much for watching.